Welcome, family, to Out to Vote, Election Night 2020 virtual watch party hosted by Equality Arizona, Equality North Carolina, and Freedom Oklahoma. We're joined tonight by leaders from across the country here to talk about the specific and unique ways this election impacts LGBTQ plus people. I'm Michael Soto. I'm the Executive Director of Equality Arizona, and I'm joined tonight by Ali Shin, the Executive Director of Freedom Oklahoma, and Kendra Johnson, the Executive Director of Equality North Carolina. Welcome, friends.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Yeah, thanks for pulling this together.
It's good to see you both.
Good to see you too. I think Allie may be frozen. Looks like the last of the Mercury retrograde is still upon us, but hopefully we'll have her soon. How are you hanging in there, Michael?
Doing okay. It's been a different kind of election day. It's been interesting. How about you?
Same, yeah. It's been a very strange election day, but I was happy to be out in the field and hit a couple of different precincts and see some enthusiasm, but really not tremendous volume. You know, it was slow and steady, but it was great. We had a lot of folks there doing poll protection, snacks, all the good things, and so optimistic, ready to know what's going to happen. Hey, Allie.
Exciting.
I think you're back. You
hey,
ready?
do you all have me now?
Hey. Yeah.
All right. I'm glad to be back. Sorry about that, y'all. Yeah, definitely Mercury retrograde. Murphy's Law type stuff and storms here in Oklahoma. So, but glad to be here with you all tonight. We're here tonight because we, like you, know that this election is going to have an incredible impact on LGBTQ folks. We also know that too often we're left out of the conversation entirely. So we wanted to create this space where we're going to talk really specifically about the impact of this election on LGBTQ folks across the country, here in our states of North Carolina, Arizona, and Oklahoma, and get together to ensure that whatever we do or do not know by the end of tonight, that we're here in this together.
Awesome. And, I just want to let everyone know that we'll be live streaming on Facebook. We are currently right now. We'll be checking the comments and answering questions as we can. We'll also have a community Zoom room when we wrap up our programming to offer a space when we can be together and just watch the results. So for the next hour and a half, we'll be hopping around the country tonight to connect with leaders in the movement, to offer perspective on what's happening on the ground in their communities. But first, we know polls are closed in Eastern and Central time zones, so we want to give a little update about what's happening in the East. Right here in North Carolina, I'll start. We know that only about 1% of precincts are reporting. We had some technical glitches at about 10 of our different precincts. And so the Board of Elections had emergency meetings and extended those hours. The polls should be closing in the next 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the site and how many minutes we're given. So we're just at this moment anxiously awaiting. I don't want to call anything because the figures that I'm seeing pop up scare me a little bit, but then it's less than 1% that's reported. So, I'll turn it over to, Central Time is closed as well, so that should be where you are, Allie. Do you want to talk about what's going on there?
Yeah, so we don't have any updates out of Oklahoma yet, but we hope to have some really soon, including on a state question that we're following carefully here in Oklahoma, State Question 805, which you all know Freedom Oklahoma wholeheartedly supports and endorses, which is a really exciting opportunity to change the way folks are sentenced here in Oklahoma and have a huge impact on our criminal justice system in a positive light. We'll have more on that as we receive some information on that. Unfortunately, we know that this is a solid red state. It's going to stay a solid red state tonight. So we can go ahead and let you know that that's what's going to happen here, but we're looking forward to reporting on the rest of the Midwest and on the Plains region as well.
Excellent. Great. And in Arizona.
And then, of course, the polls aren't closed yet.
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael. Sorry about that.
That's okay. The polls aren't closed yet here. And so we've got about an hour left. And the Pacific Coast has 2 hours left, I believe. So we've got there's some early results that some media outlets are kind of tracking, but like Kendra said, most of these states aren't reporting a whole lot of precincts yet. And so it's a little early to start predicting, but we're going to be watching the map closely throughout the night. And we'll be watching, we have team members who are watching live results and different feeds, and we'll be pulling results in as they come available for significant races. And so we're excited to bring you all of this information as we go. Equality Arizona is tracking several hundred races here in Arizona, and so it's our hope that we will be successful tonight, and the candidates that we've been supporting will have great nights here in Arizona. All right.
Awesome. We're going to go ahead and jump into our first segment then. We have some folks with us here today. Michael and Kendra, we're going to be back with you all real shortly. But for now, we're going to welcome Caitlin and Kate with Women's March to chat about why women's votes are important and why this election is so critical to women voters. We have Kate and Caitlin with us.
Hi, y'all. How are y'all doing?
Doing great. It's good to see you.
Hi.
You too. You too.
Welcome on.
Thanks.
So we're just asking folks who are joining us to go ahead and introduce ourselves, give their pronouns, and let us know why you're joining us here tonight.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Caitlin Breedlove. My pronouns are she and her. I am a proud board member of Southern Arizona New Ground, and I am the Deputy Executive Director of the Women's March, and I am the board president of Equality Arizona, and I live here in Phoenix.
Is Kate joining us?
So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We know that song has so much. It looks like Kate isn't able to join yet, so we'll go ahead and talk with you, Caitlin, for now, if that's okay. And
Sure.
Kendra will throw some questions your way as well. And then if Kate is able to jump in, that'd be great.
Oh, there she is. Hey, Kate.
There she is.
Hi,
Hectic night in Georgia, too.
Awesome. So, Kate, will you introduce yourself and your pronouns and tell us a little bit about your work?
Absolutely. Hi, friends. My name is Kate Shapiro. I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia. The pronouns I use are she and her. And I have the pleasure of being the organizing director at the Women's March, a job that I jumped into 2 weeks before Corona hit. So happy to talk about whatever you want me to talk about, Kendra Johnson.
Yeah, let's just jump in and tell us about why this election is so important for women and why it was important for you all to take the Women's March from a march to an organizing body to mobilize people to take electoral power.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's many, many reasons. But just to start off, I would say that, you know, being one of the largest sort of vehicles for women and feminist organizing in this time, I think we felt like it was our sort of political responsibility to demonstrate our values, to actually figure out how we could harness the power of everyday women to be able to make a meaningful contribution in this election, knowing that based on all of the polls and the numbers and all of that from prior elections, that the electorate of women across the country could and likely will tonight be a key deciding factor in the outcomes of the presidential election, as well as the Senate races, as well as other down ballot races. So we felt like, being this ship with a really large imprint, even though we have a pretty small staff team, that it felt really imperative for us to be able to also orient and invite women into meaningful action, which is what we've done with our Women to Women organizing program that we piloted this summer. That was really focusing on both giving people equipping people with some basic, sorry, I'm on a friend's computer, with some basic orientation around feminist legacy and principles and organizing, as well as giving folks an opportunity to participate in what ended up being one of the largest sort of women to women direct voter contact programs. So we targeted women through text and through phones, both working to expand the electorate, right, and getting more women registered to vote, as well as directing people with all of the different sort of threats that we're seeing across the country, specifically around coronavirus, voter suppression, obviously ongoing economic and racial justice crises, ways to get connected to key resources. And what we saw is that we were actually able to build a program that actually included, I think at last count, it was about 25 to 26,000 women, only over like a 12-week period. So I think that I can sort of stop there and talk about anything else that would be relevant to you all, but or if Breedlove, if Caitlin has anything else to add, I can.
I do want to, because our time is running short, but I do want to give Breedlove an opportunity. Like, what's different? I don't want to shortchange women in this, definitely as a woman myself, but what's different in 2020 from 2016, Breedlove?
So I think a couple things. Women's March started with the biggest single mobilization of any human beings with the beginning of Trump administration in the history of this country. And we become an organization that is the biggest recognized grassroots feminist brand in the country. And that's happened because of the marchers. There's been excellent organizing, and I believe in what we've done. And also, literally, women have been on the front lines of resisting Trump the entire time. And that's why we have transformed Women's March from a march into an organizing infrastructure. We've made over 13 million texts from everyday women to other everyday women in this election cycle, with probably one of the smaller electoral budgets going in the progressive infrastructure. And I also think it's important to note, both from Kate and myself, that, you know, Women's March was not known as an organization that had a lot of LGBTQ leadership, and that has really changed. Both Kate and myself, obviously, as queer women who've worked inside of Song's infrastructure, but also our board co-president, Isa Noyola, is, as far as we know, one of the only trans women of color who is in leadership in a mainstream feminist organization. But what I really think is different is that, and as provocative as this is for a lot of progressive organizing right now and a lot of sort of the doctrine that we've talked about, the chessboard's really changing. And actually, women will decide this election. Not only straight women, not only cisgendered women, women will be the decisive vote. And actually, we're seeing a gender divide, and we're predicting a gender divide tonight that is massive. And actually, there are places where Trump has picked up men, straight men in particular, we're thinking, but we don't totally know, that are actually uniting across gender lines to vote with the patriarchy, which we see as the heterosexist patriarchy. And Women's March has actually been a huge harnessing force for moving the other direction. So there's a lot of progressive questions that are on the table tonight, but I think that is why we've been so committed to this work, is we've seen tremendous energy. And the last thing I'll add, Kendra, is that part of our commitment and why it's been so important to us personally as progressive leaders to jump in and really transform and become part of the leadership of the Women's March is because 70% of marchers are brand new to activism. So it's actually women who are completely new to this work. And building a multi-racial, multi-generational force with our queer liberation values, which is what Kate and I both come out of, working in a history of red states organizing, has meant the ability to scale. As Kate has said, we have more than 340 organizing circles. We have had more than 25,000 volunteers engaged. And that's why we, have been able to do the work that we're doing. And we're extremely happy to have been able to partner with Equality Arizona, and always with you, Kendra, and with so many LGBTQ folks to actually make that a reality.
Awesome. So let me ask a question. I mean, I know in the last cycle in 2016, 53% of white women voted for Trump, which was ridiculous. But I imagine that in that scenario, even though we saw this massive uprising of women, as you said, that mobilized, what's it been like inside the groups that you've been working to create, in some ways, a unity politic, to do political education? How has that worked for y'all?
Well, I can speak to the meta, but I think Kate really is better positioned to speak to how it feels inside of our groups. What I would say on the meta level is that we've seen, and again, we're not trying to sugarcoat or Pollyanna this point, but we've actually seen that in relationship to our data points with George Floyd's murder. We have, and really our work, Women's March came out strongly around defunding the police, but then we also felt that with a base that's 70% white, we didn't want our work to stop there. We didn't want people in our base who didn't understand and weren't directly affected by white supremacy or police brutality to not be engaged in the conversation. So for those in our base who didn't understand why we were taking that position, we painstakingly have spoken to the media and our base about getting them to the point of the agreement, which I can proudly say inside of our base is a deep belief in public safety and public health systems that work for everyone. And that we felt, is our work. And I would say that, there have been times when folks have said, well, that white woman came out publicly and did this, and she probably marched at Women's March. And our answer has been, we don't know for sure, but probably very likely, because we are dealing with a constituency that's 70% white. And we feel that for many of us, actually as white progressive folks who are trying to be anti-racist in action, more than only word, that is a critically important work. So Kate can speak a little bit to how it feels inside, but I think the commitment has actually been to engage the constituency, harness the power of everyday women in a list that big. Our base is about 1.25 million. So 30% of that base is still a lot of women of color who are also brand new to activism, and they also deserve us to do the work that we need to, that some of that is white on white anti-racist organizing. Kate, do you have thoughts?
Sure. Great question, Kendra. Just a couple of quick things, since I know we might be tight on time, but just to say, I think that there, with that statistic and reality around 53% of white women voting for Trump, I think that there is, a large level of both sort of confusion historically in the last, couple of years, a certain level of sort of confusion as well as shame from other white women on how do you actually engage that. And so a lot of our work has actually been able to, figuring out how we can, one, overlay a little bit more political education to be able to demystify actually how power works, be that interpersonal, institutional, and internalized in all of these different ways, and equipping folks with some basic sort of tools and understanding around power, but also giving people opportunities to actually engage through our defund work, through our feminist organizing school, and through our local women-to-women organizing circles, asking them to actually apply some of those lessons in practice in real time, and then being able to provide a feedback loop that is not shaming, but is actually pushing and inviting folks to engage and grapple with the sort of messy and profound realities around applying an intersectional politic. And I think also what we found, sort of speaking to Caitlin's previous point around having a base of 70%, everyday women and new activists, there's a huge level of hunger, because most of these women also have been politicized somewhat online and maybe slightly in community, but are also super hungry to be able to understand and discuss and grapple with the realities around internalized white supremacy, around white fragility, some would say, and also around patriarchy and gender and class and place and all of those different ways that does shape the different contours of people's lives. And then the last thing that I just want to say on this point too is I think that we have been, and I've been gently and less gently sort of pushing and inviting all of us to sort of relinquish a little bit as white, for those of us that are white, relinquish some of the sort of finger pointing and shame. Because we also are seeing a lot of no, but those are not my friends, or those are not my family, or I am not of that, and sort of how people, work to distance themselves, and being we are woven together, and we actually, all of us have people in our lives, most likely, in some way, shape, or form, that have either been Trump enablers or, are continuing to pledge their fealty to the patriarchy, and actually asking folks to really break the sound barrier around some of that versus being like, no, those are those bad white ladies and we're the good white ladies. And we're going to sort of break that apart in real time has actually been super generative. And I think that it's really been pretty moving. And this is actually the last thing that I'm going to say is that one of the things that we've been talking about is like, how do we actually welcome the transformation that we're undergoing and acknowledge it and face forward with it, and then work to continue to transform versus, relying on an image of being correct or proper or woke or what have you.
Well, thank you for your important work. I mean, we have to build power. Sometimes it is rugged. Sometimes it's a beautiful process of transformation. I thank you both so much for doing the work that you've done to pull folks together and mobilize women across the board. So thanks for joining us. It's time to bring Michael back so we can continue with our program. And it's good to see you both. I miss you so much.
You too.
You're so
of
great.
course. Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Thank you, Michael. You're the best. Thank you, Kendra.
Welcome back, Michael.
Hello. It's good to see you, friend. Excellent. All right. So thank you so much, Kendra. Thanks to the amazing Women's March folks. It was great to listen to you and hear everything about the work that you've been doing. And now it's super excited that we are joined by the amazing folks from the Fairness Campaign in Kentucky and by Equality Ohio. Thanks, guys, for joining us tonight. How are you both doing?
It's definitely interesting night to be in Ohio and in Ohio politics, that's for sure. We're just grateful that you all invited us to join you tonight.
Absolutely. We appreciate you being here, Dominic.
Yeah,
so what's your day been like in Ohio?
I think the word that I've been using the most has been just kind of frantic and just waiting. I think probably everybody's kind of having that experience right now, but polls have been closed for an hour now. So we're just kind of waiting for things to filter in, I guess.
That's fair. What was the mood around LGBTQ voters today and in this voting season?
I think one of the most exciting things for us to see was the number of LGBTQ folks running for office, especially in rural areas. So like, I think typically we think of LGBTQ folks and we think of them running in big cities. So like in Ohio, that would be Cincinnati, Columbus, or Cleveland. But every single one of the LGBTQ folks running for our state house ran in really rural districts. And that's just really been inspiring to see when people are proud to be who they are, but also like are showing folks that they can be proud of who they are, even if they live in rural areas where it might be typically more difficult to do that.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So inspiring to see LGBTQ folks running anytime, but especially from rural places. That's just a wonderful thing to see. Why should LGBTQ folks and folks across the country be looking at your area today? They'll be looking at Ohio, be watching Ohio. We know this is a critical state. Can you share a little bit about why?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ohioans are pretty scrappy and proud about being, I think I saw a stat earlier today that Ohio had picked the president in all but 4 elections since the Civil War. So if you're looking for a good barometer for the country, Ohio is definitely it. I think there's probably been a little bit less attention paid to Ohio since 2016. But I think if you look at numbers right now, like it's going to be close, and it's looking like it's going to be a lot closer than even some of us were thinking.
That's incredible. So what all has Equality Ohio been up to for this voting season? Can you share a little bit about the work y'all have been doing in Ohio?
Yeah, so I think we have a really, really exciting opportunity to move forward on our non-discrimination bill statewide in lame duck. And kind of that's something that we've been really focusing on. I think a lot of orgs have been doing a lot of election specific work, and we've really been seeing the election as the beginning of the crazy time for us. Lame duck in Ohio is always exciting and frantic, but that's really looking good. Around the election, we created an elected official scorecard. This would be the second time we did that. The first one we did was in 2018, and we gave a grade to presidential and vice presidential candidates, as well as incumbents at the state house. And we've had a really great response from both legislators and voters that's been really helpful for folks. We're really intentional about being nonpartisan with that. And I think it really gives a good glimpse of where people are on LGBTQ issues.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's wonderful work. Chris, how are you tonight? How are things in Kentucky?
I'm okay. I'm sorry. I was having some audio difficulties on my computer, so I've joined on my phone. So you may not be able to get me perfectly, but I'm here.
That's what matters. So what's happening on the ground right now in Kentucky?
Well, I'm afraid that there aren't any election night surprises here in Kentucky. Solidly red, not completely across the board, but it's certainly trending more than 300,000 votes in President Trump's favor, with about 3/4 of the vote in. Unfortunately, many folks had hopes that McConnell would have some support chipped away this year. As we suspected, McConnell is slightly less popular than President Trump in his home state of Kentucky, but not by much. So the challenger, Amy McGrath, the Democrat, is also 270 or so thousand votes behind, I'm afraid, again with 3/4 of the vote in. So no surprises there. There is still a contested U.S. House race, District 6. That's Congressman Andy Barr. Josh Hicks is about 20,000 votes behind last we checked, with, again, about 3/4 or more of the vote in. So he could make up that margin, but it's likely that the only Democrat in our federal delegation will still be Congressman John Yarmuth, representing Louisville here. Looks like Mitch McConnell, I do believe some stations have actually already called Senate Majority Leader McConnell's race for him. So no other big surprises here in the Bluegrass State. We'll be hyper-focused on the state house, where Republicans might lose their supermajority in the state house here. But beyond that, there's nothing really nothing surprising coming from the Commonwealth.
All right. Thank you so much. What's the mood, and what has been the mood around or for LGBTQ voters in Kentucky during this election season?
Well, I think there's been a lot of hope that at least the tone and the tenor of national leadership will change. Though, of course, there's not been that much hope, again, that leadership in Kentucky would change. And that's just because we've seen the trending. The trending has been moving towards being a deeper red state in much of our Commonwealth, though not in our city centers. I actually believe that Vice President Biden performed better in Northern Kentucky than expected, and of course is doing very well in Louisville and Lexington, our two largest cities. But beyond that, again, no big surprises there. I think LGBTQ voters have been paying attention to local politics, to what's going on in the state General Assembly. This is where we face most of our anti-LGBTQ attacks. And so there are many of those contested races where folks have a vested interest. We don't have a lot of results in right now. We do believe that Republicans will still maintain the majority in the state house, but if they still have the supermajority, I don't know. So LGBTQ voters, I think, are looking at some of those local races as indications of where there are some more progressive trends in the state. It's not completely red, but a lot of it is.
Well, those local races matter, right? Especially when it comes to our quality of life and just so many critical things at the state legislature, in counties and cities, all of that. So that's good to hear that that's shifting a bit. And just, thank you so much, Chris and Dominic, for the work y'all do. You both do such incredible work for LGBTQ people in your states. And I know that LGBTQ folks in Kentucky and Ohio are grateful for both of your leadership. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Michael, we appreciate you.
We appreciate you too. It's so good to see you both, and hopefully we'll have some exciting national news to celebrate after all of this is done. So
definitely. Thanks.
See you later. Thank you. Well, that was great. So now I'm going to hand it over to Kendra, and we're going to the South now.
Yeah, I know everybody is, wanting to know what's going on with North Carolina, which may be surprising today, but there are other states in the South. So we're going to turn it over now to our friends in Georgia. In Georgia. So how you doing, Jeff?
Hey, Kendra, it is good to see you. And yes, I think that Georgia is in a battle with North Carolina tonight to be the battleground state. So frankly, I have long admired Columbia, North Carolina. It has been my personal goal for the last decade to finally be to the point that North Carolina and specifically Equality North Carolina has been at. And I think we are finally there this year.
Awesome. I also want to introduce Chris from Tennessee Equality.
Good evening. How are you all?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Well, we're not getting a lot of great results in Tennessee tonight, but hoping for good things nationwide. And we're watching some legislative races because we've never had an out LGBTQ person in our legislature before, and some are running tonight, and some are running very competitively. So we're extremely excited about that. Been looking for results, nothing yet. Polls only closed about 30 minutes ago in Tennessee, but we have some very good prospects, and we think that will move the conversation forward.
Well, awesome. Can you tell us why the national is so important for the South right now?
Why the national?
Yeah, why this national election is so important for LGBTQ folks in the South, rather.
Sure. I'll just give you an example. When President Obama was president and we faced negative bills in the legislature, there were agencies of the federal government who could say, you will lose money as a state if you pass some of these measures. That was an important defense that we had that has been gone for 4 years. And we'd love to have that back because we're not going to see massive change in our legislature. And we have among the highest number of anti-LGBTQ bills in the country and some of the worst. So having supportive federal agencies makes a huge difference in a southern state. And I think I would get an amen from Jeff on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would definitely give an amen to that. I do think going a little bit beyond that, though, is that frankly this election year, because there are a number of southern states that are in play, specifically North Carolina, Virginia, Florida, Georgia. That actually, I think, begins to draw attention to us as LGBTQ Southerners. As someone who's been doing this work here in Georgia for close to 30 years, for most of that time, the vast majority of the movement, the vast majority of the country had just written us off as conservative, unmovable, an area that was not worthy of investment. And I hope that tonight, the federal election results will show that we are actually an important player, not just in the fate of our region, but in the fate of our country. As I said on numerous conference calls about 6 years ago, if the national community continues to ignore the South, we will continue to send some of the worst, most homophobic, transphobic, racist, bigoted people to Congress from the South. But if you invest in us, we can begin to change that narrative. And here in Georgia, while it still remains to be seen what may happen with the presidential race, the signs are very good that we will re-elect Lucy McBath to the seat that was once held by Newt Gingrich, a black woman, a gun rights, a gun control advocate, and someone who has committed her life to LGBT issues. It looks like we would be picking up another congressional seat with Carolyn Bordeaux in Gwinnett County. That is a longtime Republican stronghold that tonight is probably going to go 60% Democratic. And then, of course, Georgia is the only state in the country that has 2 U.S. Senate seats up for grabs tonight. And one of the markers of success that I look at is that both of the major Democratic nominees in both of those U.S. Senate seats have made LGBT inclusion an important part of their campaign, not just when they talk to our community, but when they talk to all Georgians. That shows how far we've gone. And it bodes well for the rest of the South that we can continue to push this narrative that Southerners are resilient, Southerners are not myopic and bigoted as a whole. And if you invest in the South, if you pay attention to the South will eventually rise and become the region where I think we'll see change in this country.
Awesome. So you talked about the Senate races. What are you anticipating more? Are you mentioned? Yeah.
Yeah. So, good news, bad news. There will be Democrats that will perform well. However, we know that at least one of those Senate races will go to a runoff that will be decided on January 5th. So not just for everybody here in Georgia that may be watching in tonight, our election night is going to extend for a couple more months. But I think for the rest of the country, it may very well be the fate of the Senate that depends upon what the outcome of the Georgia elections will be. So we know that one Senate seat, there are actually 21 candidates on the ballot. So that's why we know that that seat will be headed towards a runoff. But in addition to that, the other Senate seat, it looks like the Libertarian may be pulling just enough to run that seat into a runoff as well. So there's a strong possibility we'll be having 2 federal races that will be decided on January 5th that could really decide the fate of the Senate.
Wow, talk about having patience in this election. You guys are going to have real patience.
Patience.
What about any down ballot races? We have a few more minutes. I know you started out talking a little bit about the races that had LGBT candidates in Tennessee. What are you excited about in this current cycle?
Brandon Thomas is a candidate in Rutherford County, and he used to work with us. So it would be wonderful to have someone who had worked for an equality organization in the legislature. He would also be the first Black person who had ever represented his county in the legislature. So there are a lot of wonderful historic aspects to that. He is married to a trans man. And so we think, everybody says representation matters, but he brings almost so many aspects of the community with him that are needed in the conversations in the legislature. So I'm really pulling for Brandon big time.
Yeah. And here in Georgia, we are looking to expand the number of out LGBTQ representatives from 5 to 7. Actually, we're pretty much guaranteed to expand it from 5 to 7, including the election of State Senator Kim Jackson, who is not only a member of the LGBT community, but she is a strong Black woman, and she is an ordained Episcopal minister. And so we really think that she will help change the tone in the Georgia Senate by having a strong faith voice as well as LGBT representation. We elected our first out representative in the House almost 20 years ago, and over time that has really changed how the House in Georgia reacts to LGBT issues. We think that this level of representation, especially having a voice in the Senate, could really change things for us here in Georgia as well.
Sorry. Well, fantastic. We thank you both for joining us. I was on mute to cut down on the sound. We are going to jump over to get election nights. I want to wish you both lots of patience and good nerves as you get through the remainder of the night. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Kendra.
Yeah.
That was a fascinating conversation about the South. It's incredible to see so much change.
Sure was. All right.
Hey, Allie, how are you?
I'm back. Sorry about that, y'all. Really happy to be with you, and a great couple segments there.
Excellent. So there are some results coming in. One that a state that has is much closer than I think I anticipated is Florida. So that has not come in yet, but there's I think at least 88% of the vote reporting, and it's pretty much evenly tied or within 1 to 2 percentage points. So that's fascinating. We're seeing some early predictions for some states like Oklahoma and South Carolina going for President Trump. But as you can see, electoral votes wise, Biden is still in the lead. So we've got some early things happening. There's going to be a lot that's going to keep going on. And so who knows what's going to happen with this throughout the course of the night. We did have the race for Mitch McConnell called in Kentucky. And so that's a bummer. I know a lot of us were watching that race. And I know that Chris and the Fairness Campaign in Kentucky felt that one. But it sounds like they've got amazing local politics happening and candidates that will really be able to do a lot for the people of Kentucky. So, yeah, we're getting things in slowly. I think there's a few of our states were able to count votes early, the early votes like Arizona and Florida, but we're still trying to figure out what's the results of today and the in-person voting. And so it's going to be an interesting election night. I think we're definitely looking at a long one, and that some of the results, like Jeff was saying, are going to take quite a while to really suss out. How are you two feeling looking at these early results?
Like I've been feeling this whole election. I'm excited right now because at least tentatively, Biden is retaining his lead in North Carolina. And so it's been hard to follow while I'm doing the programming, but I've been on Slack, I've been on New York Times, I've been on chat with folks, but initially straight out the bat, there was a strong lead for Biden. Some of our but in North Carolina, this is a complicated year because we've had all 13 congressional districts, 1 Senate race, our governor, and then the full North Carolina General Assembly, not to mention the full Council of State, as well as commissioners in multiple of our cities around the state. So it's a lot of races to follow, but first blush, it looks like some of our candidates are doing well, but we're only at about 60% of return, the last I checked.
Yeah, from an outside perspective, it was absolutely incredible to hop on, Equality North Carolina's website and see just like the vast list of endorsed candidates and folks that you all are working with. This is a wild year for you for sure, and I know you all have been working hard. Here in Oklahoma, you can see that our Senate race has already been called, that the electoral votes are going to go to Donald Trump. Some good news, the early votes are in the 5th. We're not sure if we can say anything about that race yet, which, is hopeful. That's an incredibly close race. We also know that the early votes are leaning Slightly against us on state question 805 with 6% of the precincts reporting, but we're going to keep monitoring that one for sure and have an update for you with a lot more detail the next time we check in. I want to remind folks, mostly that as we see these results rolling in, it would be really wonderful to have some certainty, right? I think our brains want to cling to that sort of certainty and know something for sure. We have always known and have always said that we are very likely to not know a result tonight. That is normal. It is a normal and healthy part of a democracy to allow all votes to be counted. So as folks are feeling a little bit kind of, worried, anxious, just stay in here with us. We're going to have updated information and we're going to be with you in the days that follow as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of our organizations will be providing as much information as we can in the coming days. And like Ali said, we're used to sort of instant gratification in this day and age with so much technology, but that's not how voting works, right? And sometimes that means that the results of an election take more than just that evening. And so, we're fighting for, just like every, I think, equality organization and organization in the country are fighting for counting every vote and making sure that everyone has the ability to participate, who was able to participate in this election, that their vote is counted and a part of this process. And so it's going to be an interesting night and day tomorrow and probably remainder of the week. But it's interesting results so far. And I don't know about y'all, but I was heartened just that 101 million people voted early. That was incredible. That just lifted my spirits. How about you two?
Yeah, I mean, the same. 4.6 million early voted, or absentee voted in this state. And I mean, the reality is our canvas day, as you said, is on the 13th. That's when we do certification. I think, we're of the generation where you see everything, or they try to call it on the night. But certification only happens on the 13th. And this has certainly been an atypical election, given the pandemic, the economic crisis, the uprising before that. And so we're going to have patience. That's just the reality. But I was heartened by the droves of people who came off. And as I said, when we kicked off, we really didn't even have substantial lines at any other polls around the state today, which was, it's the strangest election day in my time doing this work. But glad to see that folks got it in ahead of time.
Yeah.
Kendra, can you say that our lines to the polls a common occurrence in North Carolina? Were you expecting to see that in a non-election year?
Yeah, in election years, typically, I mean, we always have early voting, and we have a great board of elections that offers, a lot of variety of sites and weekend hours. With the pandemic, they went above and beyond really to create 17 days of early voting, including Saturdays and Sundays. So people had plenty of options really to even drop off their absentee ballot at early voting sites to make sure that it was received. And so but still, even with early voting, we typically see some folks like my mom. This is the first time I think she's ever early voted, although she's in Arkansas. There are folks who just believe in the process, who fought for our right to vote, who want to go on election day. And that changed for a lot of people because of the pandemic. I think this is the first year, she's 77, that she early voted.
Yeah,
I think that's really true. We have a really robust mail-in voting system here in Arizona, but there are a lot of folks, myself included, who were pretty resistant to that. I love going to the polls, but this year I definitely voted by mail and voted early, and we saw our numbers rise even higher for mail-in and early voting. And so, but it was amazing to see our Secretary of State and our county recorders working so hard to make sure that every person who was a registered voter had the opportunity to vote. How about in Oklahoma? Ali, I know your process was a lot more complicated in terms of early voting and mail-in voting.
Yeah, I mean, like you all, I love going to the polls. I love being the first person there in the morning. This was definitely a year that I chose to do mail-in for the first time, just watching these COVID numbers go up and up in Oklahoma, frankly, due to mismanagement, right? I wanted to make sure that I had that early. What's interesting is that we've never seen lines in Oklahoma. It's just like substantial lines are just not a thing that happens here in my memory. lines around the block today. Really, in Oklahoma County, some serious turnout and people were willing to wait for quite a bit longer than they're accustomed to. So I think, some fervor for this election that goes along with the really exciting news about the number of people who voted early. People are getting out there, they're making their voice heard, and we're thrilled to see that. Absolutely.
Absolutely incredible. Well, let's hope that this historic voter turnout translates into some amazing change at the local level, at the state level, and hopefully at the federal level.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Kendra, I think the next panel is ready to go. So.
All right, so we're going to go into a segment now on BIPOC voters in the 2020 election. And I am delighted I guess Nadine's not here, but I always love to see Isa Noyola, so welcome. Can you hear me?
I'm not here.
Oh, come on now. Hey, Nadine. So I want to welcome Nadine and Isa. Will you two introduce yourselves and tell us what you do and your pronouns?
Sure, I'm Nadine Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Equality Florida, and my pronouns are she. You can't hear me, or can you?
Isa can't hear you. Go ahead, Nadine. I can hear you.
Okay. I actually, yeah, so Nadine Smith, Executive Director of Equality Florida, and my pronouns are she.
Okay, and Isa's having some technical difficulty. Are you speaking, Isa? Are you on mute?
Well,
why don't you try and pop out and pop back in, Isa, and see if it fixes it? Or we'll just hang on and I'll start with, okay, there she goes. She's gone. All right. How are you hanging in there, Nadine, with election night tonight?
When you live in Florida, you have to have some equilibrium on election night. I've decided when it was Al Gore versus Bush, I went to a party, an election night party on the top floor of a skyscraper, and I said, I will never do that again. So I'm home with the family, and we're watching some bad news, some good news, and we have our fingers crossed for several other states right now.
Okay. What are you watching in particular in your state, or are the results totally in?
No, results are still coming in. We will emerge from this election season with some pretty historic victories. Michelle Rayner becomes the first Black queer woman in the Florida House. Chef Jones becomes the first Black gay man in the Florida Senate. We've got a lot of school board victories that matter a great deal to one of our major initiatives, Safe and Healthy Schools. The balance of power really hasn't shifted all that much in Florida at the state and local level. But the presidential, obviously, has been a painful one as Florida once again, sees the numbers come down to the wire. I think that some places have called Florida for Trump, and others are waiting for, the last batch of votes in South Florida.
Mm. All right.
Let me say this. I wrote something a couple of days ago that I it was sort of going around in my head because here we are telling everyone this is the most important election of our lifetimes, and in electoral politics, incumbents have tremendous advantage, and so I really wanted to put out there to everybody, how do we keep our wits about us and really think about this, not just in terms of one election, but the, sort of the long haul. And the piece was basically, yes, this election is really important. We've poured more resources into this election than any previously. But we really have to remember that, the work that we have to do, this is not the finish line. It's a milestone in the journey, and we got to have our eyes on the prize of building long-lasting power. And I think what we are experiencing right now is a massive demographic shift in our country. You know, it's called the graying and the browning of America, where we have an older population because of healthcare inequities and economic disparities, et cetera, is largely white. And we have a younger generation that is multicultural, but that older generation outvotes that younger generation historically in significant ways. And so our politics, what our politics look like, and what the actual attitudes of America are out of whack. And I think Florida is really a microcosm of that demographic, you know, challenge that we face. So really, the message was to say, I don't know how the election is going to turn out, but this isn't the end of the story. We got to keep building the coalitions. We've got to keep supporting the emerging electorate, these younger leaders who are willing to take to the streets and to the ballot box, and that America is in the midst of a reckoning around race, around gender-based exploitation and violence, around exploitation of immigrants, all of these things. We are in the midst of it. And so, you know, Trump isn't the cause, he's the avatar. And so our organizing has to look not just at the ballot, but the other organizing that we have to do for long-term lasting change for a future that is equitable.
All righty, we finally have the fabulous Issa back with us. Can we hear you now, darling? Can you say something?
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Hey, Issa.
All righty.
So,
no, we're glad to have you. So can you just tell me how you're doing and tell me about your name and your pronouns and where you're working?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Isa Noyola. I'm the Deputy Director at Mi Gente, which is a national Latinx organizing hub, political hub, building political home for Latinx communities. I am right now in Phoenix, Arizona. And I've been, I guess, just, you know, in it and pacing myself as well, because we know that I don't think we're going to get all the nice, neat answers tonight. And so just, yeah, I love the idea of this being a marathon, and that we're definitely, Mi Gente in particular, like so many other grassroots organizations are organizing for the long haul, not just this moment.
So, you know, every single election cycle, folks are focused on us, BIPOC voters, and getting particularly Black women, which have been the most loyal demographic. But I know as the Latinx community is set to be the majority in this country, the same thing will be happening, well, it's already happening depending on the state. But we never get the coverage or the respect we deserve. Can you, even though we like routinely vote for the Democratic Party, where do you think that BIPOC voters will make the biggest impact in this electoral cycle?
You know, I want to believe that, you know, the impact that we are having is, I mean, I think for many organizations that they're stepping to electoral politics and electoral races for the first time in this electoral cycle. And like Mi Gente did, you know, we're a 5-year-old organization, and, you know, we decided to throw our hat into the electoral game. And, you know, we started with supporting Stacey Abrams' campaign in Georgia, here in Arizona, getting out Sheriff Arpaio. And so we started to build sort of those muscles and the know-how of what it takes to, like run in these circles and run in this game. And, you know, it's been a learning process. And I think so many organizations that we're seeing in the LGBT world, and also in, you know, a lot of, you know, progressive left organizations are dipping their toe into electoral politics. And because I think we're tired of being tokenized, and so often our stories are used, but that, kind of just, it stops there. And so for Mi Gente and so many other organizations, we're building long-term infrastructure for, and the electoral piece is one part of the organizing. And so to me, that I think that is the sort of you know, the like long-term, kind of legacy and work and infrastructure that we're wanting to build and to lift up in this moment, so that folks understand that we're in it for the long haul, not just right now. And so we have, just tried various experiments and endorsements and figuring out what sort of moves to make in various parts of the country where we can, like, we've dipped our toe in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Florida, here in Arizona, where we've seen sort of the ways that, you know, the Democratic Party has, pretty much neglected, BIPOC folks and queer and trans folks. And so I think for us, we're trying to build something that's long lasting. We're trying to understand what that really takes. And, and we're learning and growing. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it is very exciting. And y'all didn't just dip your toe. Y'all got all the way in here. I've seen it in North Carolina. It's excellent work. Nadine, do you have any last thoughts before we jump to our next segment?
No, just everybody, the work continues. The, we have an obligation to not let, not let one election knock us off our stride. And I hope all of the infrastructure that everybody's been building around these elections, including the fact that not only are people winning, LGBTQ folks winning, but really outspoken, bold voices that are unapologetic and unafraid are stepping to the forefront. And that gives me a great deal of excitement and confidence that we are at an inflection point in this country. And, we may see by the end of the week that we have a new president. That will be great. But regardless of the outcome, that work that has gone into building volunteers and building candidates and building infrastructure has to continue.
Thank you so much, both of y'all, for the work that you do every day and for being here with us tonight. Fingers crossed on our candidates and, our work. All right, Michael, you're going to take it away?
Michael, you're muted.
Shoot. Sorry, y'all. All right, here we go. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here tonight with y'all, and that was an incredible panel on BIPOC leadership. And I'm so excited to be here with these amazing leaders from the Midwest. So Stephen from Promo, Monica from Outfront, Minnesota, and Keenan from One Iowa. Thank you all so much for joining us, taking time on election night to be with us. Stephen, how are things looking in Missouri tonight?
Well, I'd like to say I had more information for you. I naturally have been hitting refresh, I think, as much as anyone. And of our 3,692 precincts, it looks like we have one that is officially reported from the Secretary of State's office so far. So I know we were hoping to get a little more of our early vote in so that we could start digesting some of those numbers. But I will say that we were getting reports throughout the day that turnout has been astronomical in our state. So the county I live in, St. Louis County, is the largest by population. A sixth of the population of the state is in our county. And we were looking at close to 80% turnout. I know that there were other counties where they were looking at turnout as high as 90%. So people are excited to get out and vote. I think now we just wait and see what exactly they were excited to vote for.
Absolutely. My brother Josh was texting me from Missouri today as he was waiting in line to vote there. And so we're thrilled and excited to see what happens with your results today. Monica, how are things in Minnesota?
Well, so we also have high voter turnout. Our polls just closed at 8. But I'll say this, so over 60% of the state that voted in 2016 already voted by Monday night. So we are, so, little Minnesotans, we don't like to brag a lot, but we have the highest voter turnout in the country often. So in the last presidential election, we were at 75%. And I think people are thinking it's going to be higher this time.
That is absolutely incredible. Wow. Absolutely amazing. I'm so glad that Minnesotans are getting out and pushing that turnout even higher for this election. Keenan, how are things in Iowa?
Things in Iowa are quiet because our polls don't close for another hour. So we have literally no results in. What we do know is that turnout is through the roof. We had about 1.5 million ballots cast in the state during 2016, and we've already had 1 million cast just from absentee. So again, about 2/3 of 2016 turnout has been in absentee already. We have a very tight Senate race here. It's the second most expensive in history, second only to the Jamie Harrison and Lindsey Graham race. And we're really watching closely our Iowa State House races. I know many of us in the Midwest had rough legislative sessions this year. We had like 14 anti-LGBTQ bills, and we don't want a repeat of that next year.
Yeah, I know that Iowa and Missouri faced a lot of anti-LGBTQ bills in the last session. Minnesota's kind of a different beast and a very blue state in sort of a sea of red states. And so what can Americans learn, and what can LGBTQ people learn from what's happening in the Midwest and sort of this diversity of political thought and range of political belief and action in your states? You want to start?
Sorry, Minnesota. So in Minnesota, so Upfront Minnesota, we endorsed right now over half of our legislature, and I'll just say that we've been working, just trying to think about how do we expand democracy, how do we, join with other progressive, racial, gender justice organizations to do the work. That we think that, we really want Minnesotans to vote for true champions of equity and justice. So we started asking candidates this year about whether or not they were going to take money from police unions.
Wow.
And so like I said, like if most of our candidates win in Minnesota, you will have the majority of our legislature who will not take money from police unions, who will work on police reform, who will stop pipeline that's going in Minnesota, and we'll be working on emergency housing funding, along with a whole swath of LGBTQ issues, particularly issues around trans youth. So we're really excited about where we think our state could go. It's a turnout game, though. It's a big state, just like all of our states. So we're hopeful and, also nervous about tonight.
Wow, that's incredible work, Monica. I mean, just to have that many state legislators committing to working for intersectional justice, that is just absolutely an incredible accomplishment. Stephen, how about y'all? What are you hoping happens tonight for next year, for the next legislative?
So, I mean, there is opportunity for hope. I think our state is probably the reddest of those kind of in the Midwestern area. But even in our state, we have 7 out LGBTQ members that are vying for seats in the legislature. 4 of those are up for re-election. A couple of those are possibly new ones. We have Republicans and Democrats that are out. And then we are likely, it's kind of just making sure he gets across the finish line, but we will have our first outstate senator since 2014. So that will be an important voice for us. We have a larger House and a smaller Senate, more than usual. I know that kind of goes without saying, but just to say that there, I think, are some opportunities there to not only stop the 20+ bad bills that we had in Missouri this past legislative session, but also to try and find those ways in which we can try and move the needle forward. And I think that we're excited about that. And depending on what happens with the governor race here, which is pretty tight, but I think it's going to be maybe just within kind of the margin that we're looking for. But our sitting Senator, or our sitting governor and lieutenant governor both voted for our Non-Discrimination Act when they were senators in 2013. So granted, that's been a little bit of time, but I think it does even provide us an opportunity to just get some clarity around what this election means, what the voters are saying, and then provides us an opportunity to go back into Jefferson City and say, here's where we are, here's what we're looking for, and here's what we need for the 180,000 plus LGBTQ members of Missouri.
Amazing, Stephen. That's incredible. Keenan, how about you? What are you all looking forward to and hoping will happen to set you up for the next legislative session? I think you're muted. Oh. Keenan, you're muted.
I'm muted. Obviously, we hope the Iowa House is going to flip, and that'll make it a whole lot easier to play defense against some of that bad legislation that we were talking about. We were able to defeat all 14 of those bills this last session, but it took a whole lot of work. I will say it wasn't easy. And so it would be a lot easier if we just had a chamber that could say no to those discriminatory pieces of legislation. I think even if we don't win the House back, though, there are definitely going to be some opportunities. We had LGBTQ panic defense ban passed unanimously in the Iowa House this last session. Unfortunately, COVID kind of derailed the remainder of our session, and so it didn't clear the Senate. But with a unanimous passage out of the House, which was already Republican controlled, I'm very hopeful that we get that through next year.
That's incredible. Y'all are doing amazing work in the Midwest. Thank you so much, Monica, Keenan, and Stephen, for joining us tonight and for your incredible and invaluable leadership for LGBTQ people in the Midwest. It was great to see you all.
Thank you
so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Allie.
Hey, Michael. So glad to have you on for our segment in the West, and Andre is joining us as well, and Sarah. Hi, everyone. How are you all doing?
We're doing okay here.
I know that's a weird question to ask right now and on this night. Let's skip instead to, can you introduce yourself and give your pronouns? That one's a little less loaded.
I'm Michael Soto.
Oh, sorry. I didn't interrupt you, Michael. I missed you. It's so good to see you.
It's great to see you. Please go.
I'm Julie Gunnigal. I'm the Democratic nominee for Maricopa County Attorney. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
So welcome, Andre.
Oh, Andre, I think you're muted.
Andre, you're on mute.
Sarah, do you want to go?
Oh, sure. Hey, it's so good to see Andre. This is Sarah Burlingame. I represent House District 44 in the Wyoming legislature. I'm running for re-election, so tonight is my hopefully re-election night. And I'm the director of Wyoming Equality, Wyoming's only statewide LGBTQ advocacy group.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. We have you, Andre? Okay, we've got some technical difficulties with Andre, which we're going to try and get sorted out in the chat. I know we all want to hear about what's going on in Nevada, so we're going to do what we can to get that sorted out. But for now, Arizona folks, can we get an update? I mean, polls are closed. I know it might be a little while before we know exactly what's going on, but what can you tell us about your state right now?
Well, polls just closed here, so that's exciting. But I know Julie has been on the ground nonstop, so I'm actually going to hand it over to her to share a little bit about what she's seen and how her race has been going.
Yeah, so the Maricopa County Attorney's race is actually the third largest prosecutor's office in the country, and it's so important that we have someone in this office who is ready and willing to treat all people, including LGBTQ people, with dignity and respect. So what we're seeing on the ground right now is just the most enthusiasm at the polls. We spent all day going all across our giant county, which is nearly 5 million folks. And I'm excited. We're going to get our first ballot drop here at 8 p.m. and then hopefully precinct level reporting somewhere between 9 and 10. We're not going to know likely the results of my race, which will be very, very close until later this week. But, I'm excited about everything that I'm seeing and really optimistic.
It's been great to see so much turnout here in Arizona, so much early voting. And in particular, I think Maricopa County in particular is one of 3 counties that are really critical to the presidential election. So I can't wait to see our first results come in.
Yeah, we're hearing out of Arizona that early votes and mail-in votes are more likely to lean a little Democratic. Do you expect to see that go down throughout the course of the night, or do you expect to see that hold? What's your best prediction if you're betting votes?
That's a hard one. Julie, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no prognosticator, but I think our initial drop should be promising because those will be all of the mail-in ballots that have already been counted. The second set of reporting will be everybody who voted today at the polls. And then throughout the week, we're going to see what has been traditionally very Democratic-leaning turnout with respect to everybody who did this thing called a late early. It's basically taking your mail-in ballot and turning it in at the polls. And that takes a little bit longer to verify the signature and go through the process. So we have complete faith. We have, by the way, the world's best county recorders right here in Maricopa County. And we have full faith that every vote will count and every vote will be counted.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we're going to keep an eye on Arizona for sure. Critical Senate race there as well. Sarah, tell us what's going on the ground in your state. What's it been like in the lead up? What are you feeling tonight? What are LGBTQ folks feeling like in your state tonight?
Sure. Well, Wyoming is, by most metrics, we're the most conservative state in the union. So before, I mean, the second rather that our polls closed, like before any ballots were actually like tallied and counted, the New York Times called our U.S. Senate House races for the Republicans. Like, it's just done. Yeah, and I mean that's what it looks like when you're the most conservative state in the country, right?
Yeah.
Just heavy leads, like it almost insurmountable. Which made it, I hope, even more impressive. The Advocate just did a story on the fact that the Wyoming legislature, which is a body of 90 and has a supermajority of Republicans, has four out LGBTQ identified legislators. One Republican and 3 Democrats. And we're pretty proud of that, you know?
Yeah.
I posted something about it on social media and a friend from Kentucky said, we have 0. How does Wyoming have 4? And I think that speaks to the kind of conservative that Wyoming is, which tends to be very libertarian, a less like weaponized religiosity, and more of a like small government. So we have been able to defeat every anti-LGBTQ bill in Wyoming since 1977.
Wow.
And we've been really proud of that, right? Like blue and purple states have passed and rescinded, anti bills, and Wyoming has held the line since 1977. But tonight's election is probably not as important as our primary was. And in the primary, what we saw was some very conservative, small government Republicans got knocked out by very extreme, sort of like QAnon Republicans. Mm. And so our ability to hold that line and to keep defeating those bills is really in peril right now.
Yeah, I love to hear about like the resilience of folks like you on the ground who have been fighting this and fighting it successfully since 1990 or 1977. That's incredible, and a much larger.
I mean, I was 2 years old in 1977. I don't want to like give myself.
I'll like killed it that year at the legislature though. But that said, I think why it's so important that we have a nationwide network, right? Like we are all going to be able to have all hands on deck in Wyoming, make sure that what we've learned in other states and having tougher times in our legislatures than you've had over the last several years is something that we can bring to you. Best of luck to you in your election tonight, and best of luck to all of us in the upcoming legislative session. Hopefully, absolutely, we can keep holding that line. We know that the line's almost certainly not as far as it should be. Yeah. We've got Andre back now. We want to try and see if we can hear anything from him. Can we get a sound check from you, Andre?
Oh, no.
No, we don't have you. I'm so sorry.
It's good to see you, though.
His pronouns are he, him, and his, and he runs Silver State Equality and is a wonderful and brilliant human being who was here to talk with us tonight about the incredible work he and his team have been doing on the ground in Nevada. It's been really inspiring to watch from across the country, and I wish we could have you here. I'm, seeing in our updates that Nevada has extended the poll closing deadline by 1 hour to 8 p.m. local time in multiple polling locations in Clark County. Is that right? Getting a nod from Andre, that's correct. So that I assume means that we're going to see some delayed results out of Nevada tonight. Can we expect that as well? Also, yes from Andre. Andre's also saying in our chat that they have a marriage equality ballot initiative too. Can we get kind of this is a complicated topic, but how's that looking? Thumbs up or thumbs down right now, Andre? Okay. All right. Let's stay hopeful. We're really glad to see all the work that you all have been doing on the ground, and we're going to try and get an update from you if we can figure out the tech a little bit later. Any final thoughts out of the wild, wild west? I know that it is a diverse region and a lot's going on out there.
I've got one more thought because the polls just closed here at 7. If you're still in line and you're in Arizona, please stay in line until you vote. But you have the right to vote if you were in line by 7 o'clock. And so stay in line, make sure your vote is counted. It's delightful to see you all. Sarah and Julie, best of luck in you tonight. And Allie, you're amazing, as always.
Likewise, thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Good luck to all my fellow candidates. Michael, thanks so much for inviting me. It's good to see your face, even if it's through this.
Well, it's good to see all of your faces. Miss you all.
So put some more equality in the equality state.
Let's do it. Oh.
It looks like we have our friends in Texas joining us. Hey, Ricardo, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing super well. We're really glad to see you. Do we have Intimate with us as well?
Shortly. If we had New Mexico on here, we would have 4 states that were just like back to back to back. That would be
yeah, in retrospect, it was a mistake to not have New Mexico on. That was a missed opportunity. Hey, Emmett. It looks like we lost Kendra for a second. We know that you all were expecting to be chatting with Kendra, and surprise, instead it's going to be Michael and I chatting with you all. Emmett, I believe you have a board member joining us tonight as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I thought she'd be here, but I'm going to serve my best.
Here she is.
Yes.
So while we're getting the video up there, we'll just start with some introductions from you all. And gosh, if you could just give us your names, your titles, and your pronouns, and maybe something that you're excited about tonight.
I'll go first. My name is Ricardo Martinez. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Equality Texas. And something I guess I'll start with gratitude because I always like to start that way. So I just want to say thank you to all the statewide organizations that have been at work for so long, so long. Both the staff and the leaders of each individual organization, they work so hard and really have left nothing on the table, right? They've poured out their hearts and it's so inspiring to see just what they've been able to accomplish. If you just look at voter turnout as kind of an indicator of success, I'm so beyond grateful to be part of this extended family. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Ricardo.
I'll go ahead. Sorry, I am having tech difficulties. I feel like all of the times I was shady about people not knowing how to mute on Zoom have all caught up with me tonight. So
yeah, tonight right here on the election live stream.
Yeah, in front of the world. But yeah, so my name is Emmett Schilling. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm currently the executive director for the Transgender Education Network of Texas, or TENT, which is so much easier to say here, but then people think I sell camping supplies, so that's where we're at. Thanks so much for y'all inviting us to hopefully see Texas turn something around. I think we're still a little too early to know, but it's been a long, fraught battle, more than just even this GOTV season, and I really want just thank all of the, I mean, we have so many young people, so many organizers, so many people in the community, whether they're doing it as their full-time job or they're doing it just out of volunteer, whenever they can find the time, energy to apply. And that's been absolutely incredible. I think seeing that progress really manifest and in front of our face it is, regardless, is something that I think is a really hopeful note to see young people. You know, I have a child who's 21 to sit down at the table every evening and be reminded that I'm very old, I'm very irrelevant, and young folks overall have a better gauge, I think, on how to fix the problems that we're creating. And you know, I'm not necessarily gonna push back on that one too hard. So I'm gonna hand it over to my wonderful board member now.
Can everyone hear me okay?
We can,
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, great. My name is Lace Milburn. As Emmett mentioned, I sit on the board for TINT as their steering committee lead here in Austin. I'm a community organizer with the Black Trans Leadership of Austin. I work for a nonprofit full-time, but I am very much excited, just as Emmett said, about the potential of the youth being able to go out and have their voices be heard in such an important race. And I think people who may not have previously had a voice, even if they aren't very young, felt really engaged this year. And that's just very exciting, and I'm very inspired.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely thrilling. And this is like a huge question that we could spend the whole night on, right? Which is why we're all here. But what we wanted to bring you all on to talk about, why do LGBTQ votes matter? Like, why does this election matter to queer and trans folks? And why do queer and trans votes matter to this election? Can we start with Ricardo?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. But before I get started, I want to say I lived in Arizona for the last 5 years, and it doesn't escape me that Equality Arizona is a co-host or one of the primary hosts of this. So I appreciate y'all so much, and I appreciate all of my Arizona family. So if anyone is watching, I miss y'all a ton.
We miss you too.
In terms of why LGBTQ votes matter, I would say that, you know, just expanding that to say that pro-equality voters matter. We live in a state where 70% of people do not support discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. And, you know, I think when I first moved here, everybody used to tell me Texas is a non-voting state. It isn't that it's not in play every election. It's just that we haven't galvanized voters to turn out. And I think you're seeing for the first time in a while that changing, right? And people are excited. Young people have turned out in huge numbers this election cycle, and there's 1.8 million new voters in Texas, right? So yes, LGBTQ votes matter because there's a lot on the line for us, but we also need pro-equality voters to show up and to show up in big numbers. And so that's what I would say.
I also think it's just really important for people in the LGBT community to have our voices be heard and know that we are important and that we should be seen. We are not a monolith. We're not just a checkbox for you know, certain people to use us as a talking point, but our community is just so vast and so multifaceted. I think that we have to show politicians and people in power that we do matter and that we can change the lens or the landscape, I mean, of where we live locally, the statewide, or across the country. And I think right now the really important conversation people are having are looking at intersectional identities and knowing that with the violence committed against Black trans women as we approach Trans Day of Remembrance later this month, knowing that the protection of Black trans women is also the protection of Black lives, Indigenous sovereignty, and trans people across the board. And so I think this just was not an election to sit out. I think it was really an important time for us to be able to reach across the table, as people say. Organizations all across the state organized and worked in partnership and collaboration to really create a really beautiful movement and to build community, which is also very, very important right now as people feel like they are on the fringes of society and they are at risk for falling into being lonely or isolation, and that they don't have a voice or that they don't have any power. But I think we're starting to realize now how important community is, and I'm excited to see that.
Thanks for that. That's perfect, Lace, and really beautiful. I think on that note, Emmett, we'd love your closing thoughts about what it is we're building, what we've built, and where we go from here.
Well, regardless, we already know for certain that we have at least 2 openly trans folks who are elected to state legislatures in Vermont. And Sarah McBride won her race as well. So I think that when we look at that, right, we can, it doesn't take too much to look and see hope. And regardless of what this outcome is, I think we're all acutely aware that we still have an uphill climb to some extent, especially for those of us who are, under certain factors that are all becoming like very survival type issues in this country. And so, it gives us an idea of where to go from here. But, our community has been through a lot and will continue to push forward. And I think at the end of it, we see hope. We talk about young folks coming out, queer folks, little trans kids coming out and like being confident in who they are and knowing that they have a community. We see Michael leading the statewide equality org. And so there's so much hope still. And that's what I hope folks can really hold on to, that in the midst of all of this, why we know things feel so urgent and so pressing and so heavy is because we still know that there's hope.
Yeah. So the last thing that I would say is we don't necessarily know a ton about the results in Texas, right? We're still waiting. Polls just recently closed, and some are still waiting to close. But in terms of what is in stake for our LGBTQ family, I would say that if we gain a pro-equality majority in the Texas House, it would mean that we can actually pass a comprehensive non-discrimination bill through the House for the first time ever. And that's a huge deal for Texas. And we still have our work cut out to get it through on the Senate side. But I think hope is a powerful thing. And if we could get that House to flip, it positions us nicely to actually to create some tangible change.
As always, you all are just our favorite, loveliest people to talk to. Thank you so much for saying such wonderful things, for the incredible work you're doing in Texas. It reverberates across the country. When you say it's a huge deal for Texas, everything that you're doing is a huge deal for all of us. Thank you. We appreciate you so much. We'll talk again soon.
That was an incredible panel. Rodrigo, hi. Viv, hi. How are you? Great to see you both.
Hey, y'all.
Hi.
Hey, everybody. Viv and I coordinated our outfits in advance of this panel. We're very excited.
I love it.
Rodrigo is representing queer optimism. I'm representing queer power, to be very clear.
Okay.
I know my
I
color
like
may
it.
be associated with something else, but it's my power color, you know?
I like it. I like it. Viv, Rodrigo, would you introduce yourselves? Viv, would you start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Viv Topping. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Civic Engagement at the Equality Federation. My pronouns are she and they, and I'm based in Washington, D.C.
Amazing. So thankful.
And hey, everybody. Oh, sorry. Hey, everybody. I'm Rodrigo Hangleitinen, or Rigo for short. I work with NCTE, the National Center for Transgender Equality. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm coming to you from Washington, D.C., though my sign says that I'm 90 miles from Cuba because I'm born and raised in Miami, and I bring that with me wherever I go.
Oh, I love it. Well, it's so wonderful to see you both tonight. How are you feeling about the election so far? I mean, we're still early hours in, but how are you two feeling? I know you both, you're a part of national organizations that are watching so much that's happening tonight and always working for LGBTQ equality. How are you two feeling? What are you seeing so far?
I mean, I can start us off. I'm excited to see the amount of people who have voted and seeing the early voting results. The early voting turnout numbers as we came up the last couple of weeks was amazing. I mean, we had over 100 million people across the country who voted early, either by mail or in person or absentee, and that's a national record. And I think it shows just how much enthusiasm there is this year. I think I heard someone saying before this is an election where folks knew that they couldn't sit out, and I think that message really reverberated across the country.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd really echo that. I'm feeling really optimistic, and there's a number of reasons for it. But one of them has to do with a really long-term vision of just that this kind of voter turnout is better for our democracy in every single race. The presidency gets a lot of attention, and that's legit. But when you think about the laws that really shape our everyday lives, a lot of them come from the state house or from the city council or from the school board. When people get motivated to vote in the presidential race, they often vote on all these other races too that improve conditions throughout our lives. And we also know that voting is a habit. So all of these younger people who voted for the very first time in this election are really likely to vote next time. That bodes so well for us, just thinking about the huge future of LGBTQ rights in the US. I mean, more and more young people who support queer and trans people coming out to vote and making a habit out of voting is better for all of us for years and years to come. So I'm really excited.
I love that. Oh my gosh, on a perfect segue. What races are you watching tonight down ballot? So what are you both looking at around the country as sort of signifiers of progress for LGBTQ people and for trans folks?
I think for me, the biggest thing is looking at the Texas legislature. I know we just had some Texans on before, but watching the Texas legislature and watching the Michigan House and Michigan legislature right now to see what happens in those areas. Michigan is my home state, and I've worked in Texas before, so I have a special, deep, heartfelt connection to both states. But I'm really interested to see what happens in those states and if we are able to flip those legislatures. I think even getting closer in both Texas and Michigan is a huge deal and can mean so much for LGBTQ folks and so much for our own democracy across the country right now. And so I'm really excited to watch those, along with a whole host of other congressional races and state house races.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. And I would add that there's over 20 trans people on the ballot. So individual people who happen to be trans all over the country. I mean, there is this stereotype that trans people only live in the big cities. But right now, there's someone on the ballot running for county coroner in a county in Indiana. There's someone on the ballot in Kansas who's favored to win, who's poised to be the first openly trans legislator from Kansas. I mean, these stereotypes that we only live in big cities are completely false. In reality, trans people live all over the country, and it is really motivating to see trans people running for office all over the country in races big and small. So yeah, we're looking at those races. So you can follow NCTE's social channels. We'll be posting as races get called. And Emmett mentioned this earlier, but I would just underscore because it's so cool that Sarah McBride won her race in Delaware. So she is now the very first openly trans state senator anywhere in the country, which is really amazing.
That's just incredible. It's so inspiring to see trans folks and LGBT folks in general elected to public office. And speaking of some results around that, how will tonight's results inform your work at the Equality Federation and NCTE to advance, the agenda of working for LGBT equality, working for trans equality? How is this election, do you imagine that it will influence your work in the coming couple of years?
I mean, I think for me, sorry. Rigo, why don't you start?
Sure. Well, I'll speak to the federal level, and then I'm sure Viv will have more to add on the state level too. When it comes to the federal race, number one, we're looking at the Senate. So everyone pretty much expects the U.S. House to remain in Democratic control, but the Senate is a toss-up. The Senate is really close. Like when we started before this election, the difference was only 4 seats because the vice president technically can vote if there's a tie. It's an annoying technicality. But anyway, so Democrats need to pick up around 3, depends on whether we get the presidency too. That's really, really close. And if we win the Senate, we can pass the Equality Act. We can do more overhaul of the criminal justice system. We can make progress in totally changing the way that ICE treats transgender detainees. I mean, there's so much possibility there. And then, of course, there's the presidency. I won't belabor that because I think we all know. But I will just say that as sort of a way to understand the results around the presidency tonight is that remember that different states have different rules about when they can count mail ballots. So there are a lot of states, including swing states, where it's going to look like Trump is in the lead only because more Trump people voted in person. And then once those states start counting the mail ballots, Biden's numbers are going to go up, 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 and up. And they're only going to go up. Trump's best night is tonight. It is truly a fact that his results are going to get worse and worse and worse every hour tomorrow as more mail ballots get counted. So we all know how important the presidency is, but I would just urge you to not freak out if Trump is in the lead tonight, because that's kind of a fluke about how votes get counted. It is not going to be an accurate reflection tonight.
Yeah, I really want to echo that and just remind folks that no matter what happens tonight, even if you see things going in your way, in your direction, don't be calling races tonight. We want to wait and make sure until every vote is counted. As far as the things that I'm thinking about and how this could impact our work, we saw over 300 anti-LGBTQ bills that were introduced just this year alone in state legislatures across the country. Many of those bills were able to be stopped partly because of the pandemic and because of the amazing work that many of the organizations on this call do day in and day out. And I really look at these folks and look at these state legislatures and think about what could change if we got just a little bit closer. What could change if we just got some of these folks out who are anti-LGBTQ, who are focused on attacking trans kids? What would change if we can actually get some of our pro-equality champions actually in office and really see some of those things move? I think about the fact that there was an organization that was pushing ads against trans children in various different swing states, talking about medical care for transgender children, talking about transgender youth in athletics, and just basically attacking trans kids across the country and trying to use that as a wedge issue. And I think what we're going to be seeing, and what we're seeing right now as folks are pushing, is that folks that's not a thing that the people care about. Folks really want to focus on the things that are important for their families and want to focus on things that are going to help their states, not attacks on transgender children. And so my hope is that tonight we see really great wins across state legislatures and that we're able to see folks where we can have some of our pro-equality champions doing really well and able to push back against those anti-LGBTQ laws and potentially get some pro-LGBTQ laws passed, whether it's non-discrimination or conversion therapy bans or other things that really advance lived equality for LGBTQ folk.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the work that you do at the national level for our people. If there was one thing that you could say to folks factoring in that this is going to be a long election, right? It's not going to be over tonight. It's not going to be over tomorrow, likely, right? We're going to be counting every vote. And so that's going to take time. What would you say to LGBTQ people right now to help them get through the counting of every vote and maybe the uncertainty that follows?
I think for me, I think about just what happened this past week with the trans voter protection hotline that we were able to set up. So, and I think to me, it's a marker of the kind of power that we have in community when we are working together. So just in 1 week, we've been able to work together with Equality Arizona and many of other LGBTQ state organizations to take a trans voter protection hotline that was just going to be in Arizona to focus on Arizona voters expand it to a national hotline that's able to talk to trans folks and was able to listen to trans folks as they had issues throughout the day, offer support, answer questions, and if needed, record instances of disenfranchisement. We had some folks today who were texting and calling that line and who just were nervous about going to vote today and really needed someone to tell them they were going to be okay. But just in a week, we had over 40 people sign up to volunteer and to do that work. And so the thing that I would say as we're looking over the next few days and as we're knowing that what we're going to be seeing a long time to count votes and waiting for folks to act, waiting for those results to come back, is that our community has us. When we need support, our community is there, and our community is bigger than you may think it is at any moment. And your folks will have you, no matter what happens tonight, tomorrow, the next week. And as we go through these next coming weeks, we're going to be seeing a lot of work and a lot of things that we need to be pushing for. It's not just about winning this election tonight. It's also then about making sure that our values are being pushed forward in Congress and in state legislatures in our local communities across the country.
Absolutely. Rodrigo?
Yeah, I love that. I would echo all of that. And I would also say that, democracy takes time, and that's okay. I mean, we saw record turnout. We've said it multiple times already, but it really is that unprecedented. It bears repeating. We saw record turnout. So, and we can all agree that everyone's voice should be heard, right? We can all agree that every single vote should be counted. So that just takes time. Our elected, our election offices just logistically need more time to process all this, because the good news is that the American public largely did the right thing by still voting, even in the midst of a pandemic and what might be an economic depression is certainly an economic recession already. These were really, really, really hard conditions, and people still voted, which is remarkable. A lot of them did it safely by doing it through the mail because they were older or have pre-existing conditions or whatever their circumstances are. That is a whole new situation for our elections departments. And so they just need some more time to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. But if them taking that time is not them doing anything shady, it's actually them doing the right thing. It's making sure that democracy is preserved and every vote is counted. So, as you're reading things on social media tonight or whatever, just take a breath, log off of social media if you need to, give democracy time to really do its thing so that this can be real. And remember that as more time goes by, the Biden lead is only going to increase because of all the votes by mail.
Absolutely. Vivian, Rodrigo, thank you so much for your leadership and your work. Our movement is not possible without you. And so we are just so thankful for everything you do every day. And thank you for joining us tonight, taking time out on election night to be with us and to share such important information with LGBTQ voters. It's good to see you both.
Yeah, thanks for having us and thanks for organizing this.
Absolutely. It's great to see you.
Thank
Bye.
you all.
Oh, all right. Well, folks, this brings us to the end of our night. Allie, how are you feeling?
Feeling really good. I think it was really special to have all these folks on here tonight. I love, the last couple sessions especially. Look, we're building a movement here, right? And what we know is that elections are a tactic that we use, that they are an incredibly important tactic, and getting involved and participating in them is absolutely essential for our people, for people who love our people. And we also know that when we see the results of an election, what that tells us is what's next for us. It doesn't tell us whether or not our movement is able to continue. It doesn't tell us whether or not we're able to fight for our rights. It tells us what tactics we're going to use from here on out. That's what I love about being a part of this movement. That's what I love about the movement that was handed to us, to this generation, that will pass on to the next. Never in the history of LGBTQ two-spirit people have rights been handed to us freely. We have always fought for them. We have always organized for them. We have always voted for them, and we will continue to do so. So this is a critical night. It's absolutely critical. I want to flag that, Twitter is starting to flag posts if election results are being called too early. This is no lie. Let's just stay off the social media tonight, right? Like let's make sure that we're staying calm, looking to reputable sources for our information. and really lifting up what both Rodrigo and Viv said, which is just we're going to know a lot more in the coming days, and that is normal. It is a critical and normal part of a healthy and functioning democracy. So there are going to be moments tonight that we feel really good. There are going to be moments tonight that we feel really afraid. We are here with you through all of those moments, and when the dust settles at the end of this, what we're going to know is what's next. And I know that what's next for us is working together with you, all of you, for the future we deserve. What about you, Michael? How are you feeling?
Oh my gosh! Well, everything you just said. Yes. And I also feel like I feel so connected to our community around the country. I think that was probably the reason why we wanted to do this tonight when we first started talking about doing this event, was to make sure that LGBTQ people didn't feel alone tonight, and that they saw that there are people working every single day, 365 days a year, for our benefit, right? And to make sure that we are advancing as a movement and as a people, that we're fighting the electoral fights, fighting the policy fights, and winning in terms of just everyday real lived equality. And so, I love our community. I feel so honored to get to work with all of the people that were on this call tonight. I feel honored to always get to work with you. Democracy is not an easy thing. Representative democracy in particular can be a challenging thing, but patience is so important, and holding space with one another to be in sort of the messiness of it and the waiting, right, as we wait, and tuning out of people that are telling us that the election should be called, within 24 hours and that we should know all the results. That's not how it works, and it's never how it works. It has worked. And so it's just been delightful to be here with everyone tonight, and feel like I have community across the country, right? And people, I always feel like there are people in this movement who keep me afloat, and I hope that we're all able to do that for each other in the coming days.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I know we have some space after this just for our folks to be together, and I'm gonna let you give kind of the details on that. But just any final thoughts? Is there anything we need to know out of Arizona? Anything that you've seen? I know it's kind of hard to keep track while we're doing this as well, but anything you've seen popped up that we really want to share with our folks before we wrap tonight?
Not yet. We're still not really getting much in terms of results so far, and so I think we're ending right before our first results actually come in at 8:00, and so we'll know soon. And EQAZ will keep you up to date on our social media and that sort of stuff, but in a minimal and limited and trusted way. I think we're all doing our best to not bombard people tonight and the coming days with too much information, and to make sure that we're giving good information when we have it. So we will definitely be doing that. We will have a Zoom room open after this if you want to stay and hang out with folks and talk to people and just be in space with other LGBTQ folks. Please click on that link. We're going to be posting it in the chats on social media and here. So feel free to join that just to be with other folks tonight, because it's going to be a long night, and it's always good to be in community with each other. That makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and so what we want you to know is that we love you very much. I think our colleagues in North Carolina, just the absolute best, greatest people in the world. They've got their hands full tonight, as we know that Michael will very shortly here. Big and important states. We also just want you to know, this I saw out of the ACLU today that I thought was absolutely perfect. This is not Trump's America. It's not Biden's America. It's our America, and we are absolutely worth fighting for. I hope that you all feel safe and comfort in whatever the results are. But wherever we go from here, we are with you. Our organizations are with you. Our entire hearts are with you. And that is true for all of the people that were on this call tonight, and millions of more people across this country. We've built something special. There's nothing they can do to take it from us. With that, we hope to see some of you all in our Zoom room. Staying here with us, we're going to drop it in the chat for the Facebook Live as soon as we can get that link to you. And then it'll be open for you to just spend some time together getting to know other queer and trans folks across the country who are probably, like all of us, a little bit jittery tonight. We'd love to have you. Thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend this election evening with you. Thank you, Michael, and your team for all the incredible work that you've been doing.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you for always showing up for our people and making magic happen in everything that you do. It is a pleasure to be a colleague with you and a friend in this work. So I can't imagine doing it without you.
Thank you all so much.